So, dear audience, good morning. It's my pleasure to give you this presentation, which is entitled CBT is a Family Therapy. In fact, this form of family therapy is not yet well known in Tunisia, and so therefore it's my pleasure really to introduce you to this form of therapy. Now, as an introduction, so cognitive behavioral family therapy, which I'm going to abbreviate later on, CBFT, is now considered to be a mainstream approach which is accepted by contemporary family therapists worldwide. Now, you are going to see during the presentation that when applied to families, the CBT approach examines the dynamics of family members and how they contribute to family functioning and also to dysfunction. Now, the plan for my presentation is the following. Now, I'm going to give a short overview of the historical background. Then I'm going to talk about the rationale and the theories of CBFT. I'm going to give indications and a short overview of the therapeutic setting, show some clinical assessment measures, and therapeutic techniques. And at the end, I'm going to show you the example of a very widespread program, which is the PPP parenting program. Now, concerning the historical background. Now, CBFT, in fact, has its roots in the major developments of psychotherapy of the 1960s and 70s. At this time, I think you all know that behavior therapists used learning theory principles to address various clinical problems in children as well as in adults. And these behavioral principles that were successfully applied in the treatment of individuals were then applied to families. Now, starting from the 80s, Beck's cognitive theory principles were integrated into behavioral theory to give then to give rise to the cognitive behavioral therapy as we almost know it today. What are the main features of the cognitive theory in cognitive behavioral therapy for families? It's in fact that you evaluate and modify automatic thoughts and beliefs of the family members that they hold about each other. Now, lastly, also in the 80s, system theory was integrated into the CBFT approach. Mainly focusing on interpersonal relations, introducing communication skills learning, and also the concept of family schemas into the CBFT. Now, these theories then gave rise to different forms and applications of CBFT. So we can use CBFT now as it mainly is done by Datilio, which is a very famous American psychotherapist or family therapy therapist, who does CBFT with a very strong systemic approach. Then you can have CBFT for specific family problems or clinical problems, or you can use CBFT as a support strategy. Concerning the rationale and the theories for CBFT, now there are some theoretical assumptions which I'm going to cite and which I think are very important for the understanding of CBFT, which is that, first of all, family members always strive to maintain the family environment and to use this homeostasis to meet their needs. Then also, like in systems theory, CBFT recognizes that a change in one person in the system changes all the other individuals within the family. CBFT, of course, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, recognizes, of course, the central role of cognitions and posits that by changing family members' belief, a systemic change will ensue. And last but not least, CBFT sees the child's problem as embedded in a familial context and appreciates reciprocity. Now, concerning the concept, now what is important, and I think you are all, the most of you, which are my audience, are CBT therapists or future CBT therapists. You know that each individual has its own belief systems and which gives rise to certain thoughts and which give rise to emotions and then specific behaviors in certain situations. And these are all different for each individual, of course. Now, consistent with system theory, in fact, the CB approach to families is based on the premise that the members of a family simultaneously influence and are influenced by each other's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Okay, now this is also one of the difficulties that the CBFT therapist is confronted with, that he not only has to have a look at the individual person and their thoughts, emotions, and behavior, but also at all the mutual relationships that are existing in between the different family members. There is another concept or point which I wanted to underline, which is that the behavior of one family member generally will give rise to reactions within the other family members. And on the other hand, like in a feedback loop, the other family members affect cognitive and behavioral processes of the original family member. Now, I give you an example of, for example, this little boy that you see here on the left side, which could be a little boy who has ADHD. So he's very inattentive. He never follows through instructions given by his parents. He doesn't have good grades at school. He interrupts his parents very often, and he throws temper tantrums. So his parents then will think that maybe he does not respect us. Sometimes they might even think he is so stupid. I mean, he will, if he continues like this, he will never achieve anything in life. And so then the reflection of this, so the direction of the parents and what comes back to the boy then is that he might think that he's no good, that the parents, I mean, they don't love me, or which might give rise to a drop in self-esteem. Another important concept which I wanted to show you is the concept of family schemas. In fact, it is Virginia Satir, who is called the mother of family therapy, who said that the parents are the architects of the family. And this is also something which is enforced by CBFT. In fact, CBFT acknowledges that each of us has a family schema, and this family schema is in fact stable or long-standing beliefs that family members jointly hold about family life. And so when you have a couple, or when you have a man and a woman who are going to, for example, who are going to form a couple, so each of them brings into the couple a certain family schema from his family of origin. Now, once this couple then has children, the family schema will trickle down from the man and the woman and will give rise to a joint family schema. Now, these schemas, what are they good for? In fact, they serve as a template for family member functioning. They can be helpful to guide, or they can be a helpful guide in navigating relationships or all aspects of family life. But the problem is that when these family schemas are extreme, they can also contribute to family conflict. For example, a couple can have the shared belief that parents should never argue in front of children because this might have a negative impact on them. And so, which might then give rise to the belief in the child that there should never be a conflict in relationships. Now, these family schemas, especially when they are extreme, can also give rise to perceptual bias. For example, and I think you are all CBT therapists once again, so you know most of them. For example, I give you just an example of the mental filter, with the sort of the tendency of the family members to notice only certain aspects of the events occurring in relationships and to overlook others. For example, when you have a brother and a sister, for example, the sister might only see that the brother is bragging and being times very arrogant and overlooking the fact that also this brother, he has very good grades and that he's a very good sportsman, which might be in fact one of the reasons why sometimes he's bragging. Another perceptual bias might be standards, which is, for example, a parent's beliefs that families should have no boundaries between them, sharing all their thoughts and emotions with each other, which of course can give rise to a lot of conflict, especially when children becoming more independent and adolescent and want to have their own space. Now, concerning indications and therapeutic settings of CBFT, I'm going to first talk about the indications. Now, CBFT is classically recommended for families with younger children rather than with adolescents. However, this has changed nowadays, and there are quite a lot of intervention also which are focused on adolescents. Now, why adolescents, in fact, less than younger children? Because adolescents are generally already in various stages of independence, so parents, in fact, hold less reinforcers for the adolescents. And also adolescents view peer relationships as often more meaningful already than parent-child relationships. Now, concerning specific indications, so there are interventions which are designed for families with severe or common mental disorders. For example, families with children or adolescents with bipolar disorder, with autism spectrum disorder, or with at ultra high risk, or for children with anxiety disorders or depression. Then there are interventions for family with adversities, for example, child trauma, sexual abuse, suicide within the family, and so on. And these interventions can work as treatment or also can have a preventive aspect. And then last but not least, another indication is family support. This is when in the family you don't have any specific mental disorder or a trauma or a specific stress factor, but still there are behavioral problems or conflicts within the family. Now, how to begin? Generally, family therapists do not separate family members unless there is a specific reason. So they wait for all the family members to be there to begin really the session or the therapy. However, sometimes this is not really realistic, and the CB therapist can engage first with the members who are motivated to attend, and later then work with engaging absent members. The CB therapist in this context, in fact, has the assumption that the difficulties that a family presents in ensuring all members' attendance may be a sample of the broader family problem. Now, then what would the CB therapist do first? So he would probe cognitions regarding the reasons for seeking assistance, and he would give special attention to the fact that he would probe really each family members about their individual perspective for seeking assistance, and not only the person who, for example, dragged, or for example, the father or the mother who dragged the kids into therapy, but really to insist and to take the perspective of each family member. And then before really starting to see or to insist on the conflictual points of the family, he would try to learn about what works well in family functioning. Now, concerning the structure of the sessions, in fact, such as in individual CBT, so sessions are generally very well structured, starting with a mood check-in, and you will have the homework review, agenda setting, then the therapist will process the session content, then at the end you give homework assignment, and then feedback and summaries. Now, in fact, utilizing these components really facilitates the therapeutic efficiency and productivity. And why is this especially important for CBFT? Because in fact, processing the session content in CBFT requires the therapist to have really a very broad clinical vision. And why? Because, in comparison to individual therapy, where the therapist really only attends to one person's reactions or thoughts or feelings, in CBFT, the therapist really must put his eyes on each family member and also on the interaction. So the fact to structure the session really might help the therapist to be more efficient. Also, what is important, the agenda setting should be done in a way which values each family member's contribution to the session. So they all have to be taken into account. And there are three important aspects or three important ways are to do this clinical assessment, which is first of all extensive interviewing, then the use of inventory and questionnaires, and lastly, the behavioral observation of family interaction and dynamics. Now, taking together these three assessment forms, a case conceptualization will be possible, which then will define the targets for intervention. Concerning interviewing, I'm just going to give one interesting point or one interesting technique, which is proposed by Datilio, once again, who is called, and this form of interviewing is called the circle of perceptions. And so what is done is, in fact, you try to visualize the emotional closeness of the family members. And what you specifically do is that you ask each of the family members which are present to take a piece of paper and draw in circles that represent each family member, and the distance between the circles, in fact, equates the emotional closeness or relatedness of the family. And he's going to be asked to draw how he sees the family currently, and then how the family member wishes to see the family in the future. And what you can see here is that there is an emotional closeness, very great emotional closeness between son and mother, and the daughter seems to be a bit further away. So the wish is to bring the daughter closer and maybe to have a less closer relation between son and mother. Now, next point, the use of inventories and questionnaires. This is also something, that there are a variety of measures that have been developed specifically, in fact, to provide an overview of family functioning. For example, overall satisfaction, family cohesion, quality of communication, and so on. Now, what are the interesting or the important points of the use of inventories and questionnaires? This is one point, is that structured questions can be given that the therapist might not think about in the first place. And the second point is that some family members, and because you're in a family context, so they're all together. So some family members might not want to report verbally during the family interview some of their concerns, and they prefer, in fact, using scales or questionnaires to put down their concerns. Now, there are different forms of inventories or questionnaires. For example, the family of origin inventory, the family environment scale, and the self-report family inventory. I give you as one example, the self-report family inventory, which is a 36-item inventory which evaluates family functioning. And what you can see here is the first 5 items. Another important way to assess the family are behavioral observations. Now, there are 2 ways to do these behavioral observations. Now, first of all, is when you give very little structure to the session, for example, you can observe, in fact, the family communication in how it proceeds in its natural ways. And it allows the therapist to identify more spontaneous members versus others who fade into the background. But what you can also do is that you can give a lot of structure to the session and give specific instructions to engage in problem-solving discussions or even in some tasks, which then allows the therapist to observe difficulties in communication and problem solving, how they present in relation to a very specific task or a topic. Last but not least, self-monitoring in between session is another way to assess the patient. For this, patients or family members are given small notebooks, or for the younger generation or the more advanced generation, smartphones. And they can use or do a daily thought record. The interesting part about it is that, for example, you ask each family member, in fact, to record conflicts that arose in between sessions. And what you can see is then that each family member might have another perspective on this conflict. I give you the example of a family argument, as you see here in the blue box. So following a family argument, the daughter thinks that really my parents are blowing things out of proportions. This is really unreasonable. The father thinks, oh God, my family is a mess and I'm helpless to change it. And the mother, who thinks, well, I'm the only one who does anything to make things work out and no one in the family appreciates me. Now, this is an interesting point to see how in fact each family member has a different point of view of this argument. Now, once the assessment done, the case conceptuals, which I'm not going to develop now further, is going to be done, and the therapeutic techniques are proposed to treat the family issue. Now, as in classical CBT, now the therapeutic techniques, is a whole toolbox really of them, and they are educational, behavioral, cognitive, and emotion-based and experiential. I'm going to start with the educational technique, which you all know. It's either you give information or, depending on the focus of the intervention, you can also give a real psychoeducation. The therapist will first explain the cognitive behavioral model. If there are, for example, emotion regulation issues in the family, which is often the case with children, so then you could specifically educate the child or the children and also the parents about emotion regulation, emotion expression. If the focus is rather, for example, the intervention is on a specific mental disorder like ADHD, autism, or bipolar disorder, then the therapist would provide psychoeducation on this specific mental disorder. Another important technique is communication training, of course, whose goal is to improve family members' skills in expressing thoughts and emotions, as well as learning to listen effectively to each other. Now, the therapist serves as a role model, and he gives guidelines for speakers and also for listeners, because the difficult thing of family relationships or family arguments is always that they tend to, to raise their voices and to interrupt each other. And so Datilio proposed a very interesting technique to limit the amount that family members interrupt each other during heated exchanges, which is the pad and pencil technique. So the family member that is, or the family members that are listening to the family member that is speaking. So if they feel the urge to interrupt the family member who is speaking, instead of interrupting them verbally, they are going to ask to write down their thoughts and to give the thoughts orally to the family member who spoke once he has finished to talk. Now, concerning communication training then, so the therapist will always start with very benign topics and work up during the course of the therapy to more conflictual topics. This can also be a homework assignment. Another very important technique is de-escalation and timeout. Now, you know, we're just talking about communication training. So many family members find themselves in emotionally charged situations in which they tend to raise their voice or even to act out behaviorally. So in this context, de-escalation and timeout measures can be very important and effective. So in fact, what does it consist of? So the family members will then remove themselves from this emotionally charged situation. And once they have calmed down, they will return and address the issue in a calmer manner. Now, the therapist could suggest that family members make the sign of a T with both hands to indicate, in fact, that they need a timeout, as you can see in the picture here. Another interesting exercise is the crafts exercise. Now, this is a very entertaining task, which should be moderately difficult and which could consist of giving, for example, a crafts task, for example, crafting a keychain made out of beads, for example, for the whole family. And now, then what would the family have to do? The parents would have to read the instructions, then give the instructions to the children. The children would have to follow the directions and receive feedback on how they are doing from the parents. And this would also give the therapist the possibility to observe the frustration tolerance from the parents as well as from the kids. But the therapist does not only observe, but he will elicit and then intervene to modify unproductive beliefs and behaviors. A more cognitive technique would be Socratic questioning and the use of metaphors. You all know that Socratic questioning is used to test and reinterpret automatic thoughts. The interesting thing in CBFT would be that this would be done in the presence of other family members so that they can support each other's restructuring efforts. Now, as an example, I'll give you, for example, a family where the adolescent daughter would like to go out in the evening to parties, and the parents won't let her. So in pink, it's the statement of the daughter, you know, the automatic thought. I mean, I have the right to go out and meet new people, whereas the parents think she's still too young and can be misled by people. And so what you see is some sort of overprotective behavior of the parents towards this adolescent who strives for independence. And so this could be tackled by either Socratic questioning, or what might be more interesting is, in fact, the use of metaphors. So Friedbeck, for example, he would use the metaphor that the daughter is perceived by the parents like a sort of a shiny new car that really is very important to them and very precious, and that one has to protect from bombs that you would always like to keep in the garage, and you would only take out for special occasions. Whereas the daughter thinks that, no, I mean, I want to drive this car, and I want to go and take this car out on bumpy roads and try it out. So another cognitive techniques would be incomplete sentence fragments. This is used to identify and modify covert family rules. The sentence fragments should be tailored to the family. So, for example, what the family is asked to be done, or the family members, is they complete these fragments. For example, mothers should always, or fathers should always, or the worst thing about being anxious is. And now each of the family members will fill in the missing parts of the sentence, and then the therapist will process the points of convergence and divergence in the sentence completion. Another more experiential technique is the empty chair technique. In fact, how is this done? So the family members sit on one side of the room, and there is an empty chair which is placed on the other side of the room, and the conflict or the problem is placed on the chair. And the family members, in fact, they take turns in identifying or addressing the problem. Now, this technique was developed by Greco and Ivert, using the concept and with the underlying concept of the unified detachment. In fact, what does this mean? It means that the problem, in fact, is removed from the individual person and is removed, and then so the family then can try to objectively tackle the problem once it is removed from the individual person. So it removes part of the emotion which is attached to it, so the family can address it in a more objective and neutral way. Now, last chapter, I'm going to give you the example of a program, which is the P Positive Parenting Program, which was developed by Sanders and colleagues in Australia. Now, the principle of these programs are the following. It's for the parents to learn how to create a safe and engaging environment for the children, for the parents how to create a positive learning environment for the children. In fact, parents have to be taught that they are their children's first teacher. Another important principle is the instauration of assertive discipline. Now, in fact, parents are taught how to change from using very ineffective and coercive disciplines such as physical punishment or shouting or threatening, to use more effective strategies in specific situations, such as ground rules, discussing also these rules with children, giving clear, calm, and age-appropriate directions, and presenting logical consequences of these directions, and using quiet time or timeout. Another principle is to teach the parents to have realistic and age-appropriate expectations toward their children. And the last point is to teach the parents practical skills so that they may view a parenting as a part of a larger context related to self-care and resourcefulness and well-being. Now, this program has been evaluated by several studies, and in 2014, a systematic review and a meta-analysis has been done, which showed that significant short-term effects as well as long-term effects for the children as well as for the parents. To conclude, now the frontier for CBFT is broad and offers tremendous opportunities. Now, although CBFT has only a very brief history, it has transcended many initial boundaries and expanded its applications, and there is evidence for its efficacy. However, there are still important research questions that need to be addressed. First of all, how can the outcome be evaluated more efficiently? What are the measures that could be used to evaluate these outcomes? What are the factors that predict good or poor outcome? And what are the most pivotal aspects of cognitive and behavioral family therapy? And I thank you for your attention.